The chandelier cast fractured light across the ballroom of the Whitmore estate, each crystal prism throwing tiny rainbows onto walls lined with portraits of old money and older secrets. Outside, November rain tapped against the tall windows like impatient fingers, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne and something darker, the metallic undertone of betrayal waiting to unfold. Elena Vasquez stood near the corner of the room, her fingers wrapped around a glass of sparkling water she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. She wore a deep burgundy dress that her mother-in-law had called inappropriate for a charity gala, though Elena suspected Margaret Whitmore would have found fault with anything she wore. After 7 years of marriage to Daniel Whitmore, Elena had learned that approval from his family was a currency she would never possess enough of to spend. She was 34 years old, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of strong coffee, eyes that had once sparkled with dreams of love and partnership, but now carried the weight of accumulated disappointments. Her hands, which bore the calluses of the pottery studio she ran downtown, looked out of place among the manicured fingers of the other women at the gala. She had never quite fit into this world of trust funds and country clubs, and tonight she felt that displacement more acutely than ever. Across the room, Daniel Whitmore laughed at something his colleague said, his hand resting on the small of another woman's back, Clarissa Montgomery, the daughter of his father's business partner. The touch lasted 3 seconds too long to be casual, and Elena felt something inside her chest tighten like a fist closing around her heart. She had seen this before, the late nights at the office, the phone calls he took in other rooms, the way he flinched when she reached for him in bed. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had proof. The private investigator's envelope sat in her purse, heavy as a stone. Photographs, hotel receipts, text messages that read like poetry written for someone else's wife. 3 months of evidence that confirmed what her intuition had whispered for over a year. Margaret Whitmore approached with the precision of a guided missile, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent had been before she married into this family. At 68, Margaret carried herself like a woman who had never been told no and wouldn't recognize the word if she heard it. "Elena, dear," Margaret said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You're hovering in the corner like a wallflower. This is the Whitmore Foundation's biggest fundraiser of the year. You should be mingling." "I was just taking a moment," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "A moment." Margaret's gaze flicked to Daniel and Clarissa across the room, then back to Elena with something that might have been pity or satisfaction. It was hard to tell with Margaret. "Well, don't take too many moments. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk." Margaret's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "I beg your pardon?" Elena turned to face her mother-in-law fully, something shifting in her spine, a straightening, a decision crystallizing. "I said, let them talk. In about an hour, they'll have something much more interesting to discuss than my social skills." Before Margaret could respond, Elena walked away, her burgundy dress trailing behind her like a battle flag. She moved through the crowd with purpose now, her water glass abandoned on a passing waiter's tray. She had spent 7 years trying to be what this family wanted: the perfect wife, the gracious hostess, the woman who looked the other way when her husband's attention wandered. She had shrunk herself to fit into their mold, and still, she was never enough. Tonight, she would stop trying. The library adjoined the main ballroom, separated by heavy oak doors that muffled the string quartet's rendition of Vivaldi. Elena slipped inside, grateful for the momentary solitude. The room smelled of leather and old books, and she leaned against a shelf, pressing her palm against her racing heart. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Where are you? Mom says you were rude to her." Elena typed back, "Library. We need to talk." She waited. 3 minutes later, the door opened, and Daniel Whitmore entered with the casual confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. At 38, he was conventionally handsome. Square jaw, blue eyes, the kind of salt and pepper temples that made men look distinguished rather than old. But Elena had long since stopped seeing his beauty. Now she only saw the lies behind his smile. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "Mom's upset. You know how she gets when you don't play nice at these events. Sit down, Daniel. Something in her tone made him pause. He studied her face, and for a moment, Elena saw a flicker of the man she had married. The one who had brought her flowers for no reason, who had promised to love her through anything, who had looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. But that man had been a performance, and she had finally stopped applauding. Elena, whatever this is about, I know about Clarissa. The words hung in the air between them, heavy as the oak doors that separated them from the party. Daniel's face went through a rapid series of expressions, confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like relief. I don't know what you think you know, he began, but Elena was already reaching into her purse. I think I know that you've been sleeping with her for 3 months. I think I know about the hotel on Fifth Avenue, room 712 to be specific. I think I know about the texts where you called her your escape from everything. I'm everything, Daniel. I'm what you needed to escape from. She placed the envelope on the desk between them. Daniel didn't reach for it. Elena. His voice had changed, dropped into what she called his negotiation tone, the one he used in boardrooms and with difficult clients. Whatever that investigator told you, it's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story. Silence. The rain had intensified outside, drumming against the windows like 1,000 tiny judgments. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena had once found endearing and now recognized as a stalling tactic. It just happened, he said finally. I didn't plan it. Things between us have been difficult. You're always at that studio, covered in clay, and I needed... Don't. Elena's voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. Don't you dare blame your affair on my pottery studio. Don't you dare make this about me not being available enough while you were available to everyone except your wife. Daniel's jaw tightened. Fine. You want the truth? The truth is that I've been unhappy for years. The truth is that you never fit into this world, and we both know it. The truth is that my mother was right. I should have married someone from our circle. The words were meant to wound, and they did. But not in the way Daniel expected. Instead of crumbling, Elena felt something inside her solidify. Every doubt she'd had, every moment she'd wondered if she was making the right decision, evaporated like morning mist. You're right, she said. I don't fit into this world. I never did, and I'm done trying. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a second envelope, thicker than the first. Divorce papers, she said, placing them on the desk. My lawyer drew them up last week. I'm not asking for the houses or the cars or the trust fund. I just want out. I want my freedom. I want to stop being Mrs. Daniel Whitmore and go back to being Elena Vasquez, the woman I was before I lost myself in your family's expectations. Daniel stared at the envelope like it might bite him. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. My mother will never let this happen quietly. She'll destroy you in the press. She'll make sure no one in this city ever... I don't care. Elena's voice was steady now, all tremor gone. I'd rather be destroyed and free than preserved and trapped. Sign the papers, Daniel. Let me go. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The string quartet in the ballroom had shifted to a melancholy piece, notes filtering through the oak doors like a requiem for a marriage that had died long before this conversation. Then, Daniel reached for the pen. His signature was quick, almost eager. And in that eagerness, Elena saw the final truth. He had wanted this too. He had just been too cowardly to ask for it himself. He had waited for her to be the villain, to give him a story he could tell his mother and his colleagues. Elena left me. I was blindsided. I never wanted this. There, he said, pushing the papers toward her. It's done. Are you satisfied? Elena picked up the papers, checking each signature, each initial. 7 years of her life, reduced to ink on legal documents. She felt something wet on her cheeks and realized she was crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally letting go. I'm not satisfied, she said quietly, but I'm free. She turned toward the door, the papers clutched against her chest. when Daniel's voice stopped her. Elena. His tone had shifted again, softer now, almost wistful. For what it's worth, I did love you. In the beginning, before everything got so complicated. She didn't turn around. In the beginning doesn't count, Daniel. It's the middle and the end that matter, and we failed at both. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the party, into the light and noise and champagne bubbles, carrying her freedom in her hands. She didn't see the figure watching from the shadows of the far hallway. A man with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a leather vest that looked wildly out of place among the tuxedos. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened when she emerged from the library, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know that her entire life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Elena Vasquez had just signed away her marriage, but she had no idea what she had signed herself into. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because the story you just witnessed is only the beginning, and what happens next will show you that sometimes the people we think we know are hiding entire worlds beneath the surface. Elena pushed through the ballroom, her vision blurred by tears she couldn't quite control. The divorce papers felt like they were burning through her clutch, radiating heat against her hip. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to be anywhere but in this gilded cage of crystal chandeliers and judgment. The garden doors were ahead, French glass panels leading to the Whitmore Estate's famous rose garden. In November, the roses were gone, leaving behind thorny skeletons that somehow seemed appropriate for her state of mind. Elena burst through the doors and into the cold night air, the rain immediately soaking through her burgundy dress. She didn't care. She walked deeper into the garden, following a stone path she'd walked 100 times during endless Whitmore gatherings. Her heels sank into the wet grass, and she kicked them off, leaving them behind like breadcrumbs she had no intention of following back. The rain plastered her hair to her face, washed the careful makeup from her cheeks, stripped away 7 years of trying to be someone she wasn't. When she reached the old gazebo at the garden's center, she finally stopped. Her chest was heaving, her dress ruined, her bare feet muddy. She looked like a mad woman. She felt like one too. Or maybe like someone waking up from a long, suffocating dream. "You'll catch pneumonia out here." The voice came from behind her, deep and graveled, like boots on river stones. Elena spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The man stood at the gazebo's entrance, rain dripping from his leather vest onto the weathered wooden floor. He was older, perhaps late 50s, with steel gray hair pulled back from a face that looked like it had been carved from rock and hard living. A scar traced a line from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, and his eyes were the pale blue of winter ice. He was tall and broad-shouldered, built like someone who had spent decades doing physical work, and he moved with the coiled awareness of a person who had learned to expect danger from any direction. He was, without question, the most out-of-place person Elena had ever seen at a Whitmore event. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. The man's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Someone who probably shouldn't be here. But then again, neither should you, dressed like that in the rain." He shrugged off his leather vest, revealing a simple black t-shirt beneath, and held it out to her. Elena stared at it, then at him. "I'm not taking that." "Suit yourself." He draped it over the gazebo railing and leaned against a support post, crossing his arms. "Mind if I wait out the storm with you at least?" "Yes, actually, I do mind. I came out here to be alone. I noticed. Saw you run past the window like the devil himself was chasing you." Those ice-blue eyes studied her face, and Elena felt uncomfortably seen. "Except it wasn't the devil, was it? Just a man in an expensive suit who didn't deserve you in the first place." Elena's breath caught. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you've been crying. I know you're standing in a freezing garden in a ruined dress when you could be inside where it's warm. And I know that look in your eyes, the look of someone who just did something terrifying and necessary and is wondering if they made the right choice." The accuracy of his observation cut through Elena's defenses. She found herself sinking onto the gazebo bench, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation with Daniel was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. "I just filed for divorce," she heard herself say, "at my mother-in-law's charity gala, while she was giving a speech about the importance of family values." The stranger made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Probably both." He moved then, settling onto the bench across from her. Up close, Elena could see more details. The tattoos that crept up from beneath his collar, the calloused hands of someone who worked with them, the small gold ring in his left ear. He smelled like leather and rain and something else, something that made her think of open roads and freedom. "Why are you here?" she asked. "This isn't exactly a leather vest kind of event." "Business." His answer was clipped, his expression giving nothing away. "I'm looking for someone. At a Whitmore Foundation gala? You'd be surprised where people turn up." Elena shivered, and before she could protest, the stranger had retrieved his vest and dropped it around her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body heat, and she pulled it closer without thinking. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'm Elena, by the way." The stranger was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Then he seemed to reach some internal decision. "Marcus," he said. "Marcus Stone." "Marcus?" She tested the name. "You're definitely not on the guest list, are you?" That almost smile again. "Let's just say I have my own invitation." They sat in silence for a moment, the rain creating a curtain around the gazebo, isolating them from the glittering world inside. Elena found herself oddly comfortable with this stranger in a way she hadn't felt comfortable with anyone in years. There was something solid about him, something grounded. He didn't look at her like she was Daniel Whitmore's wife. He looked at her like she was simply a person, one who had made a hard choice and was sitting with the aftermath. "Can I give you some advice?" Marcus asked, one stranger to another. "Why not? Tonight seems to be the night for unexpected conversations." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Whatever you just did in there, walking away from something that was killing you slowly, that takes more courage than most people have in their entire lives. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Not his family, not society, not even yourself at 3 a.m. when the second thoughts come creeping in. You did the right thing." Elena felt tears prick her eyes again. "How can you possibly know that? You don't know anything about my marriage, about what happened." "I know that a woman who runs into the rain to escape isn't running from a good thing. I know that tears at a party mean something broke a long time ago, and you finally stopped trying to glue it back together. That's all I need to know." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing what remained of her mascara. "You're very philosophical for someone in a leather vest." "The leather vest is the reason I became philosophical." He stood, brushing rain from his jeans. "The things I've seen, the people I've known, they teach you to recognize what matters. And what matters is that you just set yourself free. Don't waste that freedom wondering if you made a mistake." Elena stood too, suddenly reluctant to see this strange conversation end. "Will I see you again? I mean, not that who knows?" Marcus was already backing toward the garden path. "It's a small world, smaller than you think." "That sounds ominous." He paused, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. But it was gone before Elena could identify it. "Go inside," he said. "Warm up. And Elena?" He waited until she met his eyes. "Trust your instincts. They're better than you think." Then he turned and walked into the rain, and within seconds, the darkness had swallowed him whole. Elena stood in the gazebo for a long moment, his leather vest still wrapped around her shoulders. It smelled like him. Leather and rain and something wild. She should return it. She should call after him. But her feet didn't move, and her voice stayed silent, and eventually, the cold forced her back toward the house. She didn't know that Marcus Stone was already making a phone call. She didn't know that the name Elena Vasquez was about to be spoken in rooms she couldn't imagine, to people whose existence she had never suspected. She didn't know that her chance encounter in the rain was anything but chance. And she certainly didn't know that the stranger who had offered her his vest was the president of one of the most powerful motorcycle clubs in the country, a man whose real name wasn't Marcus Stone at all. His real name was Marcus Steele Rodriguez, and he had just recognized the woman who had signed divorce papers in the library. He had recognized her because 25 years ago, he had married her mother. Elena Vasquez had no idea that she had just met her stepfather, a man who had been searching for her since the day she was born. 3 days after the gala, Elena sat in her pottery studio, her hands coated in clay as she worked the wheel. The studio was small, just a converted warehouse space on the industrial edge of the city, but it was hers. She had fought Daniel and his mother for years to keep it, to maintain this one corner of her life that belonged only to her. The divorce was proceeding faster than she'd expected. Daniel's lawyers had already reached out, and Elena's attorney, a fierce woman named Patricia who had no patience for Whitmore intimidation tactics, reported that Daniel seemed almost eager to finalize everything. No contested assets, no protracted negotiations. He simply wanted out. Elena should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. The bell above the studio door chimed, and Elena looked up, expecting a customer. Instead, she saw Marcus Stone, or whoever he really was, standing in her doorway. He looked different in daylight, still rough around the edges, still wearing leather, but less mysterious, more human. In his hands, he held a manila envelope. "How did you find me?" Elena asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "I asked around." He didn't seem bothered by her tone. "Can we talk?" "I should call the police." Strange man tracks down woman he met once at a party. That's the beginning of a true crime documentary. "You're right. It is." He took a step closer, then stopped, respecting the space between them. "But I'm not here to hurt you, Elena. I'm here because I owe you the truth, and I've owed it to you for a very long time." Something in his voice made her pause. The clay was drying on her hands, cracking at the knuckles. She grabbed a towel and wiped them clean, buying herself time to think. What truth? Marcus, she couldn't think of him by any other name, set the envelope on her work table. "Before I show you this, I need to tell you a story. Will you listen?" Against her better judgment, Elena nodded. He took a deep breath. 28 years ago, I was a different person. Young, stupid, running with a crew that thought they were invincible. I met a woman, Carmen Vasquez. Elena's heart stopped. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Smart, fierce, didn't take any crap from anyone. We fell hard and fast, the way you do when you're 22 and think love conquers everything. His voice had softened, lost in memory. We got married 6 months after we met. Small ceremony, just a few friends. Her family didn't approve. They wanted better for her than some punk on a motorcycle. But Carmen didn't care. She said she saw something in me that no one else could see. "My mother," Elena whispered. "You're talking about my mother." Marcus met her eyes. "Yes. But she never mentioned." Elena's mind was spinning. "She died when I was 3, in a car accident. I don't remember her at all." "The accident wasn't an accident." His voice was flat, controlled, but Elena could see the pain beneath. Carmen was killed by a man named Victor Reyes. He was running drugs through her father's business, using the import company as a front. Carmen found out. She was going to go to the police, and Victor couldn't let that happen. Elena sank onto her stool, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your mother was murdered because she tried to do the right thing. And I'm saying that when she died, I didn't know about you." Carmen had just found out she was pregnant the week before. She hadn't told me yet. She was waiting for the right moment. After she died, your grandmother took you and disappeared. Changed your name, moved across the country, never told me I had a daughter. That's impossible. Elena's voice was shaking. "My grandmother raised me. She told me my father was a deadbeat who abandoned us. She said he was no good, that I was better off without him. Your grandmother blamed me for Carmen's death. She thought if Carmen hadn't married me, she never would have gotten mixed up in the investigation, and maybe she was right. Marcus's shoulders sagged. I've spent 25 years looking for you. I finally found a lead 6 months ago, your marriage announcement in the paper. But by the time I confirmed it was really you, you were already deep inside the Whitmore world, and I couldn't just show up at your door. So you showed up at the gala instead? I showed up because I found out something else, something that made it urgent. He pushed the envelope toward her. Open it. Elena's hands trembled as she unsealed the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, bank records. She flipped through them, her confusion growing, until she saw a name that made her blood run cold. Victor Reyes. And next to his name, another one. Margaret Whitmore. I don't understand, Elena said, even as understanding began to dawn. What does Margaret have to do with the man who killed my mother? Margaret Whitmore was Victor Reyes's business partner for 15 years. She helped him launder money through her husband's foundation. The same foundation that threw the gala where I found you. When Carmen started asking questions, Margaret was the one who told Victor to handle the problem. The room tilted. Elena grabbed the edge of her work table to steady herself. You're saying that my mother-in-law? I'm saying that Margaret Whitmore ordered the hit on your mother. I'm saying that for 7 years, you've been living under the roof of the woman who made you an orphan. Elena stood abruptly, knocking over a container of tools. They clattered to the floor, but she didn't notice. She was pacing now, her mind racing. This is insane. I can't just believe this because some stranger shows up with documents. These could be fabricated. This could all be some elaborate... I'm not a stranger. Marcus's voice was quiet, but firm. I'm your stepfather, and I've been investigating Margaret Whitmore for 5 years, building a case that the authorities couldn't ignore. I didn't want to approach you until I had proof, real proof, that could take her down. But when I saw you at that party, crying, running into the rain... He paused, composing himself. I couldn't wait anymore. You deserve to know the truth. Elena stopped pacing. Her back was to him, her shoulders shaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I used to ask my grandmother about my parents. She would get this look on her face and like she was carrying something too heavy to put down. She always said the same thing. Some things are better left buried. I thought she meant the pain. I thought she was protecting me from grief. She was protecting you from revenge. Marcus moved closer, still careful not to crowd her. She knew that if you ever found out what really happened to Carmen, you'd want justice, and she'd seen what the pursuit of justice did to your mother. Elena turned around. Her eyes were dry now, but there was something new in them, a hardness that hadn't been there before. You're right, she said. I do want justice. I want to look Margaret Whitmore in the eye and tell her that I know what she did. I want to watch her empire crumble. I want her to feel what my mother felt in those last moments, that everything she built was being taken from her. Then help me. Marcus held out his hand. I've been working on this alone for too long. I have evidence, I have connections, but I need someone on the inside. You know the Whitmore family. You know their secrets, their weaknesses, the skeletons in their closets. I just filed for divorce. I'm not exactly on the inside anymore. But you were for 7 years, and more importantly, you're angry. Anger, channeled right, can move mountains, or tear down empires. Elena looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw her mother there, in the jawline maybe, or the stubborn set of the mouth. She saw 25 years of searching, of loss, of hope that refused to die. She took his hand. Tell me everything, she said. And then tell me about the Hells Angels. Because I have a feeling you're not just some concerned stepfather, Marcus Stone. Or should I call you something else? For the first time since they'd met, Marcus smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. My brothers call me Steele, he said. And yeah, it's time you met the family. The Hells Angels clubhouse sat on the outskirts of the city, a converted auto repair shop surrounded by a tall fence and an air of menace that kept curious neighbors at a distance. Elena had driven past places like this 100 times without really seeing them. They existed in a different world from the charity galas and country clubs she'd inhabited as Daniel's wife. Now, that world was opening its doors to her. Marcus, Steele, rode beside her in her modest sedan, having left his own motorcycle at her studio. He'd spent the drive explaining the structure of the club, the code they lived by, the decades of history that had brought them to this moment. The Hells Angels weren't what the media portrayed, he said. Sure, there were bad elements. Every organization had them. But at its core, the club was about brotherhood, loyalty, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. We're not vigilantes, he said, as they pulled into the compound. We work with the law when we can, around it when we have to, but we don't start fights. We finish them. The gate swung open, operated by a young man with tattoos covering both arms. He nodded at Steele with obvious respect, then looked at Elena with undisguised curiosity. This her? He asked. This is her. Let Demon know we're here. Inside the clubhouse, Elena felt immediately out of place, a feeling she was getting used to. The space was larger than she'd expected, with a bar along one wall, pool tables in the center, and a seating area filled with leather-clad men and a few women who looked like they could handle themselves in any situation. A jukebox played classic rock at a comfortable volume, and the smell of beer and motor oil hung in the air like perfume. Conversation stopped as she entered. Elena felt the weight of 24 gazes, assessing her, judging her. She lifted her chin and stared right back. An older man rose from a corner booth. He was massive, at least 6'4", with a gray beard that reached his chest and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. The patches on his vest identified him as the vice president. Steele, he rumbled, clasping Marcus's hand. Been a long time. Too long, Demon. This is Elena, Carmen's daughter. The change in the room was immediate. The suspicion melted into something else. Recognition, perhaps, or respect for the dead. Carmen Vasquez, Demon said, his voice softening. I remember her. Came to the clubhouse once, gave Steele hell for missing dinner. Had brass ones, that woman. She did, Marcus agreed, and her daughter inherited them. Demon studied Elena for a long moment. You know what you're walking into, girl? Going after Margaret Whitmore isn't like going after some street dealer. She's got money, power, connections. She's got people in the police department, in City Hall, maybe even the FBI. I know, Elena said. She also has my mother's blood on her hands. I'm not walking away from that. Something shifted in Demon's expression. Approval, Elena thought. All right then. He turned to address the room. Listen up. This is Elena Vasquez, Steele's stepdaughter, and she's under the club's protection as of now. Anyone has a problem with that, speak up. Silence. Good. Now, let's talk about how we're going to take down the most powerful woman in this city. Over the next several hours, Elena learned more about the investigation than Steele had shared in the car. The club had been building a case against Margaret Whitmore for years, not just for Carmen's murder, but for a network of crimes that stretched back decades. Money laundering, drug trafficking, bribery, obstruction of justice. Margaret's fingerprints were everywhere, hidden beneath layers of legitimate business and charitable work. The problem was proof. Margaret was meticulous, paranoid, and ruthless. She never touched anything directly. Everything went through intermediaries, shell companies, layers of plausible deniability. The documents Steele had shown Elena were damning, but not quite damning enough for a conviction. We need someone on the inside, said a woman named Rosa, who served as the club's intelligence coordinator. Someone who can get close to Margaret without raising suspicion. The divorce makes that harder, Elena said. She's probably already written me off. Not necessarily. This came from a younger member named Torch, so called, Elena learned, because of his skill with a welding torch, not his temper. Daniel's been calling his mother every day since you left. Word is she's furious. Not at him for cheating, but at you for embarrassing the family publicly. How do you know that? Torch grinned. We've got friends in useful places. Point is, Margaret sees you as a threat now, and when Margaret sees a threat, she deals with it. That gives us an opening. What kind of opening? She's going to come after you, Steele said, his voice grim. Try to destroy your reputation, your business, maybe even your safety. She'll want to make an example of you. And we let her try, Rosa added. While we're watching, recording, gathering evidence of her intimidation and harassment. It won't prove murder, but it'll show a pattern of criminal behavior. That might be enough to get the feds interested. Elena's head was spinning. A week ago, her biggest concern had been whether to use blue or green glaze on her latest pottery collection. Now she was sitting in a biker clubhouse, planning to entrap her mother-in-law into incriminating herself. There's something else, she said slowly. Something I've been thinking about since Marcus showed me those documents. What's that? Margaret didn't just help Victor Reyes kill my mother. She's been laundering money through the Whitmore Foundation for years. That charity gala I attended, the money raised goes into an account that gets siphoned off to shell companies in the Caymans. I've seen the books, or at least I've seen enough to know that the numbers don't add up. The room went quiet. You have access to the Foundation's financial records? Demon asked. I did. When I was married to Daniel, I had access to everything. I never paid attention to it before. It was all so boring, and Margaret made it clear that my opinions weren't welcome. But I remember things. Account numbers, authorization codes, and more importantly, she paused, making sure she had their attention. I know where Margaret keeps her private records, the real ones, not the ones she shows the auditors. Steele leaned forward. Where? There's a safe in her study at the estate. She thinks no one knows about it, but Daniel let it slip once when he was drunk. He was complaining about how she trusted her secrets to a vault more than she trusted him. Do you know the combination? No, but I know someone who might. Daniel's assistant, Benjamin. He's been with the family for years, and he handles a lot of Margaret's personal affairs. He's also gay, which Margaret pretends not to know about because he's too useful to fire. He hates her almost as much as I do. The energy in the room shifted. Suddenly, Elena wasn't just a victim seeking justice. She was an asset, and a valuable one. You've been paying more attention than you let on, Rosa said with new respect. 7 years of being underestimated gives you a lot of time to observe. Elena stood, squaring her shoulders. So here's what I'm proposing. I go back to the Whitmore world. I play the role of the bitter ex-wife, make enough noise that Margaret feels compelled to silence me. While she's focused on destroying me, you get close to Benjamin, get access to the safe. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the lobby of the Whitmore Foundation headquarters, her heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. She wore a simple black dress, professional, understated, nothing like the burgundy gown from the gala. This wasn't about making a statement. This was about getting close enough to strike. The plan had come together faster than anyone expected. Benjamin, Daniel's assistant, had agreed to help almost immediately when Rosa approached him. Years of quiet humiliation at Margaret's hands had built a reservoir of resentment, and he was ready to see it overflow. He provided the combination to the safe, along with Margaret's schedule and the security codes for the estate. Tonight was the Foundation's board meeting. Margaret would be occupied for hours, defending her financial decisions to investors who were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. The timing was perfect. Elena's role was simple: create a distraction. She had called Daniel that morning, crying, begging to meet and discuss one last thing before the divorce was finalized. Daniel, ever eager to avoid conflict, had agreed to meet her at the Foundation building. His presence would draw attention away from the real operation happening at the estate. Elena. Daniel appeared from the elevator, looking tired and older than she remembered. The past weeks had not been kind to him. What's this about? My mother's in a meeting and I really don't have time. I know about the Foundation, Elena said, loud enough for the receptionist to hear. I know about the offshore accounts, Daniel. I know what your mother has been doing. Daniel's face went pale. Keep your voice down. Why? Are you afraid someone might hear the truth? She stepped closer and Daniel flinched. I have documents, proof, and I'm going to take everything she's built and burn it to the ground unless you give me what I want. What do you want? His voice was barely a whisper. I want her to admit what she did to my mother. I want her to confess, on record, to ordering Carmen Vasquez's death. Daniel's confusion was genuine. What are you talking about? Your mother died in a car accident. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what Margaret wanted them to know. Elena pulled out her phone, showing him one of the documents Steele had provided. This is a wire transfer from your mother to Victor Reyes, dated 3 days before my mother's death. Victor Reyes, the man who ran her car off the road. Coincidence? Daniel stared at the screen, his face cycling through disbelief, horror, and finally, a terrible recognition. Oh God, he breathed. I always knew she was ruthless, but I never thought. You never thought because you didn't want to think. You looked the other way your entire life, Daniel. We all did. But I'm done looking away. Across the city, Steele and his brothers were moving through the Whitmore estate like shadows. Benjamin had disabled the security system at exactly 8:47 p.m., giving them a 15-minute window before the backup protocols kicked in. They moved with military precision, years of experience guiding their steps. The safe was exactly where Benjamin had described, behind a portrait of Margaret's late husband in her private study. Steele's hands were steady as he entered the combination, the numbers burned into his memory. The door swung open. Inside were files, dozens of them, financial records, correspondence, photographs. A lifetime of crimes, meticulously documented by a woman who trusted no one and kept evidence as insurance against everyone. Steele found what he was looking for almost immediately, a folder labeled Vasquez. Inside were photographs of Carmen, surveillance reports, and a handwritten note in Margaret's elegant script. Handle the problem. Make it look like an accident. M.W. His hands trembled as he held the paper. 25 years of searching, of grief, of wondering if he would ever find proof. And here it was, in black ink on cream paper, as casual as a grocery list. Steele. Rose's voice crackled through his earpiece. We've got movement. Security patrol coming around the east side. Copy, we're done here. He photographed every document in the folder, then carefully replaced them exactly as he'd found them. Margaret couldn't know they'd been here. Not yet. Not until everything was in place. They slipped out through the service entrance, disappearing into the night as silently as they'd come. Back at the foundation, Elena's confrontation with Daniel had drawn exactly the attention she'd intended. Margaret burst out of the boardroom, her face contorted with fury. What is the meaning of this? She advanced on Elena like a ship cutting through water. How dare you come here, making accusations, embarrassing this family? I dare because you killed my mother. The words stopped Margaret cold. For one fraction of a second, her mask slipped, and Elena saw the truth beneath, the cold calculation, the complete absence of remorse. Then the mask was back. I don't know what fantasy you've concocted, Margaret said smoothly, but I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out, and rest assured, my lawyers will be in contact regarding your slanderous accusations. I look forward to it. Elena held Margaret's gaze without flinching. I look forward to telling them everything I know. Everything I can prove. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind her, she could feel Margaret stare like a blade between her shoulder blades. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for Margaret to walk into it. The federal investigation moved faster than anyone anticipated. The documents Steele had photographed, combined with Elena's testimony about the foundation's finances, gave prosecutors enough probable cause for a warrant. When FBI agents arrived at the Whitmore estate 3 weeks later, Margaret Whitmore was hosting a dinner party for the city's most influential citizens. She was arrested in front of 40 guests, her wrists bound in handcuffs that probably cost more than her housekeeper's monthly salary. The image made the front page of every newspaper in the country. Elena watched the arrest from a coffee shop across the street, Steele sitting beside her. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. 25 years of waiting had finally come to an end, and the weight of it sat between them like a shared prayer. The trial took 8 months. Margaret Whitmore hired the best defense attorneys money could buy, and they fought every piece of evidence with the ferocity of cornered animals. But the documents were irrefutable. Benjamin testified about years of witnessing financial manipulation. Former employees came forward with stories of intimidation and threats. And through it all, the handwritten note sat in evidence like a silent accusation. Handle the problem. Make it look like an accident. Elena testified on the 4th day. She spoke about her mother, the woman she'd never known, the life that had been stolen from both of them. She spoke about her marriage to Daniel, the years of unknowingly living under the roof of her mother's killer. She spoke about finding the truth and choosing to pursue justice, even when it would have been easier to walk away. When she stepped down from the witness stand, Steele was waiting in the gallery. He nodded once, a small gesture that carried the weight of everything they'd been through together. Margaret Whitmore was convicted on 17 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and racketeering. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she was led from the courtroom, she passed Elena without a glance, her back straight, her dignity intact even in defeat. Elena felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not closure, not the vindication she'd expected. Just a quiet emptiness where rage had once lived. 6 months after the trial, Elena stood in her pottery studio, her hands coated in clay as they had been the day Marcus first walked through her door. The space had expanded. She'd bought the adjacent unit, hired 2 assistants, started teaching classes on weekends. Her work was selling well, not because of the scandal that had made her famous, but because she had finally stopped trying to be anyone other than herself. The bell above the door chimed. Steele walked in, his leather vest dusty from the road. He'd been traveling, visiting chapters, attending funerals and weddings, and the 1,000 small rituals that held the brotherhood together. But he always came back. "Got something for you," he said, setting a small box on her work table. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, the colors slightly off. A young woman with dark hair and coffee-colored eyes stood beside a motorcycle, laughing at something off camera. She was beautiful, radiant, impossibly alive. "That was taken 2 weeks before we got married," Steele said. "She just told me she wanted to learn to ride, said she was tired of always being the passenger." Elena traced her mother's face with a clay-stained finger. "She looks happy." She was. We both were. He paused. "She would have been proud of you, Elena. What you did, standing up to Margaret, refusing to back down. That was pure Carmen." Elena set the photograph carefully on her shelf, next to the urn that held her grandmother's ashes and the small pottery bowl she'd made as a child. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about what comes next. And I want to help. The club, the work you do, protecting people, finding justice when the system fails. I want to be part of that." Steele studied her for a long moment. "It's not a life I would have chosen for Carmen's daughter. Maybe not. But it's the life I'm choosing for myself." He nodded slowly, a smile breaking through his weathered features. "Then welcome to the family. For real this time." Elena clasped his hand, her stepfather, her ally, the man who had searched for her across 25 years of grief and never given up. Behind them, the late afternoon sun slanted through the studio windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, the woman crying in the rain at the Whitmore Gala, signing divorce papers, believing that her life was falling apart. She hadn't known that it was actually coming together for the first time. She hadn't known that freedom waited on the other side of everything she'd lost. The photograph of her mother seemed to glow in the sunlight, and Elena could almost hear Carmen's laugh echoing through the studio. Some things were better left buried, her grandmother had always said. But some things needed to be unearthed, examined, and finally laid to rest. Elena Vasquez had started this journey as a woman with no past and no future, only a suffocating present that she couldn't escape. She had ended it as something else entirely, a daughter reclaimed, a truth teller, a guardian of the vulnerable. She had signed divorce papers at a party, not knowing that her husband's family had destroyed her own. She had met a stranger in the rain, not knowing he had been searching for her since she was born. She had walked into a world of leather and chrome and brotherhood, not knowing it would become her home. And now, standing in her studio with clay on her hands and sunlight on her face, she finally understood what Steele had told her that night in the gazebo. Trust your instincts. They're better than you think. Her instincts had led her here, to justice, to family, to a life she never could have imagined. And she was just getting started. If you watched this far, it's because this story touched something inside you. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end," so I can get to know you and know who really appreciates the stories on this channel. And if Elena's journey reminded you that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and acting anyway, then hit that subscribe button and join our community. We tell stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength, and every week there's a new chapter waiting for you. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to fight for the truth. Sometimes the family we're born into fails us, but the family we choose, the people who stand beside us when everything falls apart, that's where we find our real home. Until next time, remember, honor doesn't retire, brotherhood never ends, and justice, no matter how long it takes, always finds its way home.